You weren't supposed to exist. That's the truth no one ever tells you. Not your parents, not your teachers, not your gods. You weren't part of a plan. You weren't written into the fabric of the universe. You just appeared out of nowhere, a flicker of awareness in an ocean of chaos. The universe didn't ask for you. It didn't prepare a place for you. And when you die, it will go on exactly the same. Silent, indifferent. It sounds cruel, doesn't it? But that's where everything begins. Because until you face that truth, you're not really living. You're just performing someone else's idea of life. Most people never reach that silence. They drown it out with noise, with plans, jobs, relationships, beliefs, anything to avoid the simple, unbearable thought, maybe none of this was ever meant to be. But this silence always waits. Hey, it hides in those sleepless nights when you stare at the ceiling and can't remember why you're trying so hard. It's in the moments after the party, when the laughter fades and you suddenly feel like a stranger inside your own body. It's in the mornings when you wake up and realize you don't actually know what you're waking up for. And when it finally hits, you really hits you, you don't just feel small, you feel hollow. Like everything you were ever told about purpose was a comforting lie. You start to see the world differently. You see how people cling to stories just to survive. Religion, love, success, progress. All of it fragile little shelters built to protect us from the void. But the void doesn't care. It doesn't go away just because you believe hard enough. It stays. It watches. And in a strange way, it's honest. Camus called this moment the absurd, the collision between our desperate need for meaning and the universe's complete indifference. It's not a theory. It's a feeling. That sudden, sharp awareness that nothing out there is built for you. That the stars aren't watching and the future doesn't care. And yet, here you are, aware, questioning, wanting something more. That's the paradox. You crave meaning more than anything, but meaning doesn't exist outside of you. You want to believe there's a reason for the pain, the struggle, the fear. But maybe there isn't. Maybe existence just is. So, what do you do with that? What do you do when the sky goes silent? You have a choice. You can run, fill the emptiness with distractions, pretend everything has a purpose. Or you can stay. You can stand still and listen. You can look directly at the nothing and refuse to look away. That's where the real journey begins, not in comfort, but in confrontation. When Sartre said, existence precedes essence, this is what he meant. You're not born with meaning. You're born, and then you spend the rest of your life creating meaning from scratch. You don't discover who you are, you decide who you are. Every act, every choice, every failure, they're all brushstrokes on the blank canvas of you. But first, you have to accept that the canvas was blank to begin with. That's the hardest part, because everything inside you resists it. You want to believe there's something written underneath, a reason, a destiny, a story that makes it all make sense. But there isn't. There never was. And yet, somehow, the more you accept that, the more alive you feel. When you stop chasing what isn't there, you start seeing what is. The small, fragile beauty of existence itself. The way sunlight hits a wall. The sound of your own breath. The quiet pulse of being. It's not grand. It's not heroic, but it's real. Existentialism isn't about despair, people get that wrong? It's about honesty. It's about staring into the void and saying, all right, so there's no meaning, but I'm still here. That's the beginning of freedom. When you stop looking for permission to exist, when you realize you don't need a cosmic reason to live, you just need the courage to live anyway. Because maybe the point isn't to find meaning. Maybe it's to create it moment by moment. To take the chaos, the confusion, the absurdity, and turn it into something beautiful. Something only you could make. But before you can build anything, you have to destroy the illusion that meaning was ever given to you. You have to let go of the stories that kept you safe. You have to burn the map and walk into the unknown with nothing but yourself. And that's terrifying, because it means no one is coming to save you. No God, no system, no destiny. Just you and the vast silence of the world. But maybe that's what makes life sacred. Not because it's guided by divine purpose, but because it's not. Because it's raw, unplanned, temporary, and completely yours. You weren't supposed to exist. And yet, here you are, breathing, thinking, dreaming, building, fighting, loving, existing against all odds. The universe doesn't care that you're here, but that doesn't mean your life is worthless. It means your life is yours alone to define. That's what Camus meant when he said, the struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. You don't need to reach the top. You just need to keep pushing the boulder, not because it's meaningful, but because it's yours. This is where the myth of Sisyphus becomes real. He's not a man cursed. He's a man awake. He knows the futility. He knows the pointlessness. And still, he chooses to push. That's not despair. That's defiance. That's what it means to be human. Maybe meaning was never something to be found out there. Maybe it's what happens when you live fully inside the absurd, when you accept the silence and still choose to speak. You were born without meaning. You will die without it. But in between, you have a chance to give meaning to everything you touch. That's where existence begins. Not in being told who you are, but in daring to create yourself, knowing that nothing lasts forever. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all it ever needed to be. So you've accepted it. The world doesn't owe you meaning. You were born without a script, without a purpose, without a voice telling you what to do. At first, it feels like death. Then it starts to feel like freedom. Because once you see that there's no plan, no design, no cosmic rule book, you realize something extraordinary. You can become anything. That's the moment Camus called revolt. Hey, it's not a rebellion of violence or destruction. It's quieter. It's a decision, a simple, stubborn refusal to give up just because the universe won't explain itself. When you understand that nothing means anything, you can either collapse or you can create. And creation is rebellion. To build in a world that doesn't care, to love in a world that forgets, to hope in a world that stays silent, that is the most human act there is. Camus said, the only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion. That's what existentialism really is, freedom disguised as despair. When the foundations fall, when all the shoulds and musts and meant tos disappear, you're left with one terrifying, beautiful truth. you're free. Not free in the comforting sense, not free to be happy or free to win. Free in the raw, unbearable sense. Free to decide, free to define, free to fail, free to become. That's what Sartre meant when he said, man is condemned to be free. Condemned because freedom isn't easy. It's not a gift, it's a burden. You carry it every day you wake up and realize that who you are is entirely up to you. And that weight crushes most people, eh? They spend their lives hiding from it, behind religion, ideology, identity, even ambition. They want someone else to tell them who to be, because freedom means there's no one left to blame. But if you can carry that weight, if you can face yourself and still stand, you'll find something deeper than happiness. You'll find peace. Because for the first time, you'll know that everything you are comes from choice. Not fate, not luck. You. The absurd isn't your enemy, it's your stage. And every act of defiance, every laugh in the face of emptiness is art. Nietzsche understood this better than anyone. He watched the old gods die of the collapse of belief, the erosion of moral certainty, and he didn't mourn. He celebrated, because their death meant we were free to create new values. He said, we must become gods ourselves simply to appear worthy of it. What he meant wasn't arrogance, it was responsibility. If there's no divine hand shaping your life, then you must become the sculptor. You must invent the light in your own darkness. That's what self-overcoming means. Not conquering others, but conquering yourself. Your fear, your comfort, your need for validation. To become more than the things that built you. And it's not easy, because the world doesn't want you to be free. It wants you predictable. It wants you obedient. It wants you to keep following the story. School, job, family, retirement, as if that's all life is supposed to be. But deep down, you know it's not enough. You can feel it in your chest, that quiet ache, the one that asks, is this really it? That's not depression. That's the call of freedom. That's your soul remembering it was never supposed to be domesticated. Freedom is lonely at first, because when you stop living by other people's meanings, you lose your place in their world. You step outside the crowd and realize how small and fragile everything is, the systems, the rules, even your own desires. But that loneliness is the birth of individuality. It's where your real self begins to speak, the one that was buried under expectation, the one that doesn't need approval or permission. And when you listen long enough, you start to realize that meaning isn't something you search for. It's something you build out of your actions, out of your love, out of your persistence. It's like a flame you keep alive in a wind that never stops blowing. It flickers, it dims, but it's yours. And that's enough. Camus said, there is no fate that cannot be surmounted by scorn. To scorn the absurd is to laugh in its face, to live joyfully, even when the world refuses to justify itself. To say, you may be meaningless, but I will live meaningfully anyway. That's the rebellion. To wake up each morning and still choose life, not because it's easy, not because it's fair, but because it's yours. Sisyphus was never a story about punishment. It was a story about perspective. The gods could make him roll the stone forever, but they could never control how he felt about it. And in that small space between fate and response, That's where freedom lives. You are Sisyphus. You are the one pushing through repetition, struggle, and absurdity. But unlike him, you can understand why you keep going, because the act itself is meaning. Because to push the stone is to live. Existential rebellion is not about escaping the void. It's about dancing inside it. It's saying, I know this world doesn't make sense, but I'm going to live beautifully anyway. When you start to live like that, you stop being afraid of endings. You stop needing guarantees. You start doing things because they feel right, not because they matter. You read a book because you love it, not because it will make you wise. You help someone because you care, not because it will be remembered. You create something because it feels honest, not because it will last. Every act of creation becomes an act of rebellion. Every moment of compassion becomes defiance. Every breath becomes art. You were born without meaning, yes, but that means you're free to give meaning to everything you touch. To live with purpose, even when purpose doesn't exist. And maybe that's what it means to be human. To stand beneath an indifferent sky, look up and smile anyway. Freedom begins the moment you stop asking why and start answering with, because I choose to. That's the beginning of self-creation. That's how you turn nothing into something. That's how you make the meaningless beautiful. At some point, the rebellion quiets down. The anger softens. The despair fades into something else, something wordless. It isn't happiness. It isn't joy. It's a calm recognition that you're here alive, and that's enough. You've fought with the void. You've screamed into silence. You've asked the sky for answers and heard nothing back. And yet, somehow, you kept moving. That's when you realize maybe the silence was never the enemy. Maybe it was an invitation. Camus called it the invincible summer. He said, in the depth of winter, I finally learned that within me there lay an invincible summer. That line wasn't about optimism. It was about endurance, View. About discovering a warmth that doesn't come from the world, it comes from you. Because when you stop demanding meaning from life, you begin to see life. Not as a puzzle, but as a presence. The sunlight through a cracked window. The sound of rain on metal. The face of a stranger who smiles and disappears forever. Tiny, absurd, perfect moments, existing for no reason at all. And that's when something shifts. You stop wanting life to explain itself. You start wanting to live it. That's the quiet miracle. The meaningless world becomes beautiful the moment you stop trying to make it make sense. Sartre would have called it authenticity, to live without illusion, to choose yourself fully, knowing you are finite, flawed, and free. No God, no fate, no excuse, just you. He said, freedom is what you do with what's been done to you. You can't control where you began, the body you were born in, the era, the pain, but you can control what you make of it. That's where meaning hides, not in the world, but in your response to it. The absurd gives you the canvas. Freedom gives you the brush. And every choice you make is a stroke, sometimes messy, sometimes accidental, but undeniably yours. Nietzsche called this amor fati, love of fate, not resignation, not endurance love. To look at your past, your wounds, your losses, and say, I wouldn't change a thing. Because even the worst moments sculpted you. They taught you what comfort never could. pain doesn't make life meaningless. It makes it real. Amor fati is not pretending that suffering is good. It's understanding that it's inevitable and choosing to love life anyway. It's looking at the chaos and whispering, yes. That's the highest form of rebellion. To not just survive the absurd, but to embrace it. To not just exist despite meaninglessness, but to dance with arms open, eyes clear. And that dance changes everything. When you stop needing a purpose, everything becomes enough. A walk, a breath, a laugh that no one hears. Each thing glows with its own fragile truth. You begin to see meaning as something that flows, not something fixed. You create it in motion through love, through action, through presence. Meaning stops being a mountain to climb. It becomes the ground beneath your feet. Camus said, one must imagine Sisyphus happy. But happiness here isn't euphoria. It's clarity. It's knowing that the struggle itself is the point. That pushing the stone, living, failing, beginning again, is the story. So maybe the question isn't why do we exist? Maybe it's now that we exist, what will we do? You see, there's a quiet nobility in being human, not because we were chosen, but because we choose anyway. We choose to care, knowing it won't last. We choose to build, knowing it will fall. We choose to love, knowing it will end. That's not foolishness, that's courage. To love without reason, to create without certainty, to live without guarantee. That's what it means to defy the void. And in that defiance, we become something extraordinary, creatures of meaning in a meaningless world, little gods of our own creation. The universe doesn't need us. It doesn't care if we fail or thrive. But maybe that's the point. The indifference of the cosmos gives us space to be wild, to be original, to be free. There's a strange tenderness in that thought. The stars will burn out, the oceans will vanish, and everything we know will be forgotten. And yet, right now, you're here breathing, thinking, feeling, a conscious spark against eternal dark. And maybe that's the rarest thing of all. Nietzsche once wrote, "To live is to suffer. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering." But maybe we can go even further. To live is to suffer and still love the living. Because love is meaning in motion. Not romantic love, but the deeper kind, the love of being, of existence, of everything fleeting. It's the acceptance that this fragile, brief moment is all we'll ever have, and that's enough. When you reach that point, you stop fearing death. Not because you've solved it, but because you've understood it. Death isn't the end of meaning. It's what gives life its shape. Without an ending, there's no urgency, no depth, no reason to care. Knowing that it ends, that it must end, makes every second burn brighter. That's amor fati. That's the invincible summer, not eternal life, but eternal acceptance. So maybe this is what it means to be free, to see the absurdity, to face the void, to smile anyway, and say, I will live, not because life has meaning, but because I can. You don't need the universe to approve your existence. You don't need destiny to validate your choices. You are the answer to your own question. You are the meaning you were looking for. And that realization doesn't make life smaller. It makes it infinite. Because when you stop searching for a grand design, You start noticing the quiet miracles, the flicker of light through trees, the laughter of strangers, the warmth of another hand in yours. Those are not signs. They are moments, tiny bursts of being, proof that existence, though absurd, is still radiant. So when the world feels cold again, when the weight of meaninglessness presses down, remember this. You don't have to escape the darkness. You only have to light a candle, Tom. Because you're not here to find purpose. You're here to create it, to rebel, to love, to live. And that, perhaps, is the only meaning that ever mattered.